Welcome back, everybody, to the Just Talk Hoops podcast. Hope you guys had a great week and hope you guys enjoyed the trade deadline, which just wrapped up this past week. That's what the focus of our episode today is going to be about. We're going to be giving every team a grade on their trade deadline. Make sure to like, subscribe, comment if you're on YouTube. Comment what your favorite team did on the trade deadline, how you feel about that. And if you're on Spotify, give the show 5 stars. Really helps. Really appreciate it. So we're going to get right into it here because we do have a lot to talk about today. Today, what we're going to be doing, I'm going to be going through every team, and I'm going to give them a grade for how I think their trade deadline went. Now, I'm going from the perspective of that team. So if we get to, say, the Mavs before we get to the Wizards, because we are going alphabetically, and we say, okay, like we're talking about the Anthony Davis trade, when I'm talking about the Mavs, I'm solely talking from the perspective of the Mavs. Now, obviously, I'm not a fan of every single one of these teams. I'm a Nets fan and a Nuggets fan. So I have more of a fan insight on those, but I do, watch the games from other teams, so I do understand sort of what they're losing and what they're gaining. Now, from a fan perspective, like that's why I ask you guys to comment if your favorite team did something and you disagree with my grade, because you guys have probably watched more games of your team and you probably understand the culture a little more, right? Like there is something to be said for a player that was endeared by a fan base leaving or a player that will fit really well in a culture joining it, right? I do think that does help. But we will get right into it here. So we're going to go through every team. We're going to go in alphabetical order, like I said, and we're just going to say what I think about every single one of these. Give them a grade, A to F. A plus to F, but I didn't give any team an A plus. If you're an A, I think that it's a really good move for you that will definitely help at some point. For if you're in the B range, then I think it's helpful. It may not move the needle, but it is a positive. For C's, then that's just something that I kind of just feel like you're still at status quo. D's and F's is you either didn't do enough or you did too much and you did it wrong. So that's how we're gonna grade this, and then obviously we'll do our games of the week at the end of the episode as we do every single week. So we're gonna start off here with the Atlanta Hawks. The Atlanta Hawks, they got Gabe Vincent, Jock Landale, Jonathan Kuminga, Buddy Hield, some picks. They lost Kristaps Porzingis and Luke Kennard. So first off, They also got Duop Reith, but I believe they waived him, or at least he's not expected to play for the rest of the year because of that injury. But then they may have waived him as well. I can't quite remember, but they did get a lot of players, so it makes sense if they dropped him. Anyway, so Gabe Vincent, that's not a huge move. Obviously, that was more the Lakers trying to get rid of Vincent, and the Hawks saying, "Yeah, we'll take him on." Landale, he had a really good debut with the Hawks. I think that he's actually really talented. Now, is he going to be your starting center of the future? No, but he is playable, especially since you're getting rid of Porzingis. So you can start Okongwu, but then you can say, okay, well, Landale, we definitely like him off the bench. Now we still have a center rotation, even though we gave up Porzingis. So I liked that trade for them. Kuminga and Buddy, I do feel like, obviously Kuminga, that's an upside swing, right? We've seen him be up and down over the years. We've seen him be someone who's talked about in trade deals all the time, right? He is a staple in trade talks because the Warriors have been trying to get rid of him forever. Now, I think the Warriors sold a little low, which we'll talk about, and a little late, which we'll talk about with the Warriors in a bit. But I think that the Hawks honestly did a good job going out and getting someone who could potentially have upside. But if he doesn't, whatever, right? Because you've got your guys. It's not like you're relying on him to be a franchise guy. It's not like you gave up something insane for him. Now, Porzingis is talented, but we'll talk a little bit more about him with the Warriors one. So I don't hate them getting Kuminga. I think that Buddy Hield, that's another one that's it's a player who can rotationally play. He'll kind of fill that role of Luke Kennard, so now your shooting doesn't take too much of a dip because you're bringing in Buddy Hield, who we know can shoot the ball really well. In terms of losing Porzingis and Kennard, like I said, you're bringing in someone who fills the role of Kennard and Buddy Hield, so you don't really have to worry about we just lost all our shooting. And then for Porzingis, he's been so injury prone. We've seen this through the past 5 years. He just cannot stay on the court. So, getting rid of someone who you took a big potential swing in the offseason, you said, okay, well, maybe Kristaps Porzingis will work out. Obviously, he didn't. And so you say, okay, well, we made that move we moved Trae Young, right? Which is one that I didn't include in this since I already talked about that deal since that happened forever ago. So I didn't really talk about like, oh, well, they got Trae Young. I think that deal is interesting, but I do think that it does kind of change what this team was looking for, right? They say, okay, well, Trae Young doesn't want to be here anymore, or he wants to leave. He's someone that you've been relying on forever to be like, to be your guy, right? To be your star. And now you lose him. So now I think you say, okay, Porzingis no longer fits the direction we're going. We're trying to go a little bit younger. We're trying to rebuild. So a guy like Jonathan Kuminga, and like not entirely rebuild, not like tank, but just like use a little bit of youth to, like just kind of get some new energy into this team, right? And I think that Porzingis, he obviously doesn't bring that, but Kuminga does. So moving on from Porzingis, I'm not mad at all. I give him a B+. I think that they got talented players in return for players who they're not going to miss terribly. Move on here. Go to the Celtics. So the Celtics pretty much, there was some picks and stuff involved in this deal, and they lost Josh Minot, which I forgot to write down. But the big one was they got Nikola Vucevic. They lost Anthony Simons. I think this is a decent trade for them. I do think that it helps them, which is why I gave them the grade that they did, that I did. Vucevic, I do think he provides some things that fit really well with the Celtics organization, right? We've seen them be really, really willing to shoot the three ball. Like that's something that they bank on, and Nikola Vucevic is someone who will shoot the three ball. He can play that role of an Al Horford who drifts behind the arc and can shoot from the corners and I feel comfortable with Nikola Vucevic's jump shot if I'm a Celtics fan. He also brings a little bit of offense and brings a big man, and I know Neemias Queta has been playing really good basketball this year, but I don't think that he's who you want starting throughout the playoffs. So Vucevic, I do think is a starting quality center. Is he much more than that? Not really, but I do think he is starting quality. Anthony Simons, losing him. Now they took, I wouldn't say a gamble on him, but they took him in the offseason. They said, okay, we're going to try and have him be kind of our sixth man spark plug. He's been decent for them, but he hasn't been incredible, right? So I don't think they're like, oh man, we're giving up a big piece. Like he's a talented basketball player, but in order to fix a hole in your roster in your center position, I don't think that it's a bad thing to give up. So I gave them a B for this. I think that you're getting a starting center. You're getting rid of Simons, which you're not looking to get rid of Simons, but you're okay with doing so while keeping the rest of that roster intact. Plus the news that Jason Tatum could come back later this year. We could be looking at a team that's Pritchard, White, Brown, Tatum, and Vooch. I think that that's a solid team. I think that's a team that could scare some teams in the East. So because I do think there is a big upside with this team now, in the sense that they could potentially contend in a weaker Eastern Conference this year. Obviously, if they win a championship, then this trade grade would go up even more. But because of that ability for them to contend, that I think that this trade helps, then I did give them a B for this one. So solid grade there. For the Nets, so this is my team, right? I am a Nets fan. I know I'm wearing a Nuggets shirt right now, but that's just, I like the Nuggets as well, but I am a Nets fan. They got Josh Minot, Ochai Agbaji, and they got picks. They lost Cam Thomas, Haywood Highsmith. So let's start with the gets, and then we're going to talk about Cam Thomas a little bit. So Josh Minot, Ochai Agbaji, I don't think they're in the long-term plans for this team. I think that maybe they'll get some minutes this year, but I don't think that they're going to be a long-term. Like they're probably gone after this next season. I think they're both on the last year of their deals, I want to say. So they're probably going to be gone after this. Then they got some second-round picks. They've got a bunch of picks now. We'll see if they do anything with those or if they're just like they might pick players with them, or maybe they'll make some move in the offseason, maybe move up in the draft, depending on how the lottery works out for them. But the bigger thing for them, I think, is losing Cam Thomas. Now, just real quick, I have been a Nets fan for my whole life, and I was a huge Cam Thomas fan. I should have worn my Cam Thomas jersey for today's episode. Maybe I will next week in remembrance. But I watched him in a preseason game, like in the summer league and a preseason game of his rookie year in that preseason game, he hit a big shot against the Bucks. I was like, this guy's legit. Like, he's going to be a good player. Like, he's going to average 20 one day. He did, right? Like, Cam Thomas last year had a great individual season. He had, like, after KD, Kyrie, and Harden left, he was the spark plug that kept the Nets interesting to watch. It's like, man, this kid who hasn't been getting any talent, or not any talent, hasn't been getting any PT, is now playing extremely well, and he's obviously got a ton of talent to score the ball, and it was so fun to watch. So it does hurt from a fan perspective to see Cam Thomas leave because he was the exciting net for like years, and the rest of the team was not interesting, and he was so fun to watch just score the ball. Now, on the other side of things, I do understand why they moved on from him, right? It was obvious that he was going to leave this offseason. It was obvious that he wasn't fitting the long-term plans of this team, right? I do think that, I mean, he just didn't want to be here. He wasn't bought in, and it was clear he didn't mesh with the team anymore. So losing him is, although it hurts, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I think it was going to happen eventually. I think they just couldn't find anyone to trade for him, so they said, all right, just walk. And so, respect to Cam Thomas, and I hope him the best luck wherever he stops next. And it'll always be fun to watch him just get some buckets. But I think it was time for the Nets to move on. Anyway, I'll move on. I gave them a C+. It doesn't change much. The players they brought in don't change much, and losing Cam Thomas, like I said, there's a positive and a negative side to that. I'm going to try and move a little quicker since we have so many teams to get through today. The Hornets, they got Kobe White, Xavier Tillman, Malachi Branham, some more stuff. They gave up Colin Sexton, Mason Plumlee, and Pat Connaughton. I gave them an A- for this. I think this is a really good move. They've been playing really good basketball recently. I think Kobe White is obviously extremely talented. He'll probably be a bench guy for them, but having a player as talented as Kobe White off your bench is awesome. And yeah, like I said, they've been playing such good basketball that bringing in a guy who I think fits what they need and not giving up a terrible amount is a good moves. I think that's exactly what you want, especially when you're on a bit of a run and you feel like maybe next year, right, you could be a team that is interesting in the East. And so Kobe White will fit that timeline because he's still young. He's still got, years left where he'll be playing good basketball. So I gave them an A- for this. I really like this move for them. Another team that was interesting and actually involved with the Hornets was the Bulls. So they got a ton of guards, the Chicago guards. They got Ivy, Simons, Dillingham, Sexton, Yabusele, Richards, and Picks. Then they lost Vucevic, they lost Kobe White, they lost Ayu Dosunmu, and they lost Kevin Huerter. So they lost more talent than I'd say they brought in. But the reason I like this for them is they finally made a decision at what direction they're going to take because they have been sitting there just complacently being in the play-in for years and complacently just being like, well, I guess we'll just, be mediocre again. And finally they're saying, all right, let's go into that rebuild phase, right? Let's get rid of Vucevic. Let's get rid of Kobe White. Let's get rid of these guys who no longer fit our timeline. Let's bring in some young talent and see what happens, right? Jaden Ivey, I know he's been injury prone, but he's shown flashes of being really, really talented. Rob Dillingham, we haven't seen much of him, and I'm not sure how much I believe in him, but he is a young guy who potentially could be a high upside swing. Colin Sexton, Anthony Simons, these are guys who may not fit your long-term plans, but for the moment, they're another young piece who could either be used to develop and play in Chicago for a while, or they could be used as a trade piece in the future. Now, losing those guys, it does hurt, right? Because those are good role players. Those are better players than you're going to have in your rotation now. And they're very small now, but they're not going to win a lot of games. But I don't think that that's necessarily a problem. I think that they're going into that rebuild. I think that's what they finally needed to do. Like, they needed to make that decision, and I'm happy they finally did it. So I think this is a good move for the Bulls. I give them an A- for this. I do think that they made a series of good moves. Now, they did go in an interesting direction by getting so many guards, but I do think at the end of the day, like, finally making a decision is one of the most important things for a franchise to do, and they're finally doing that, which I can respect that. Next, we got the Cavs. They got, obviously, James Harden. That's the blockbuster. Then Keon Ellis. I almost said Keon Coleman. That's the wrong sport. I'm thinking of the Super Bowl. Happy Super Bowl Sunday, everybody. The Seahawks are winning. And Dennis Schroeder. They lost Darius Garland and DeAndre Hunter. I gave them a. I don't know exactly what to think about this trade. I think I'll give them a B plus, partially because I really like the move of bringing in Keon Ellis and Dennis Schroeder. We already talked about that last week, so I won't talk about that much today. But James Harden and Darius Garland, that's an interesting switch because obviously Garland's been so injury prone these past few years, while James Harden has been one of the better offensive engines in the league. Now, it does make you older, and it does kind of be like, well, we have to win this season or we're kind of done. I kind of wish they'd used Garland's contract to go get like a athletic wing defender. I don't know who that would be, but I think I would have been more interested in them making that move. And instead they're getting James Harden, who obviously really great player, not athletic, not a wing defender, definitely not a defender. But I do think that he should work well. Now they won their first game with him playing, and I think that he should work well with Donovan Mitchell and the rest of these guys, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley, and maybe they could make something happen. I do like them finally making a move, right? Because I wasn't a fan of that smaller backcourt in Garland and Mitchell. I just felt like we saw the impact of that, and it wasn't working anymore. Now Darius Garland is a very talented player, so it hurts to lose him. But getting these guys, I like all three of those pickups, and we'll just kind of see what happens in the future. This is a trade grade that we could look back at in a couple of years and be like, wow, that was a terrible trade, or wow, that was a great trade for Cleveland. So I gave them a B for the moment, just because there's so much upside, like similar to that Celtics trade where there's so much upside where maybe this team all of a sudden kicks it into gear. There's also so much downside of maybe we look back and say that was a bad move, especially since Harden has not been prone to sticking around teams for long. Next, we got the Mavs. Now, this one is one that I cannot get behind. They gave up Anthony Davis, D'Angelo Russell, Jaden Hardy, and Dante Exum. They got back A.J. Johnson, Chris Middleton, Marvin Bagley, Tyus Jones, and some picks. They did not get a whole lot of talent for one of the better players in the league. Now, I know Anthony Davis has had his struggles with injuries. I know that it's been tough to really say, oh, well, he's been one of the best players when he hasn't been on the court a whole lot. But when he's on the court, he's one of the best players in the league. He's an incredibly talented two-way player. He provides a ton of value, and you just gave him up for A.J. Johnson, who may have some upside. We'll see what happens once he gets to Dallas. Chris Middleton, who's old. Marvin Bagley, who I think, although he's been playing better basketball recently than he was, in his first few years, I'm not moved. Tyus Jones, who is whatever, and picks, which are helpful, but not like great. I just don't like this trade for them, honestly. I think that you could have gotten more for Anthony Davis. It seems like they weren't shopping him for a long time. Now, it was weird. Like, a lot of guys seem to get traded like out of the blue, which I'm sure there was a lot more happening on the inside than we think. But I still don't like him giving this up. I'm giving them a D for this. I don't hate the idea of being young and rebuilding around Cooper Flagg, but it feels like in order to do that, you need to get some more young talent besides just Cooper Flagg. And in this, you don't really get that. The Nuggets, they didn't do much. They got a pick. They gave up Hunter Tyson and a pick. I'm not moved. I'll give them a C because they stayed pretty much at status quo, which I think is fine for a Nuggets team that is already very talented, right? That there wasn't a big hole in that Nuggets team that they could solve. I don't think that they should be mad at like, oh, well, we lost Hunter Tyson. Oh, no. He's not a great basketball player. And just like a swapping of second-round picks, that's not going to change much. So whatever, C, they're doing fine. The Pistons, they got Kevin Huerter, they got Dario Saric, they got a first-round pick. They lost Jay Ivey. I like the move of getting Huerter because I do think that he provides some of the shooting that this team has kind of been lacking. Obviously, we talked about the Pistons maybe being in the talks for Michael Porter Jr. if the Nets were to trade him. Obviously, the Nets didn't move him, but Kevin Huerter, obviously not Michael Porter Jr., but he is a good shooter, so that does provide some value to a team that needs that. And then giving up Jay Ivey, I know that, I know that he's been talented for them, which maybe makes them think, right, like that sort of hurts. But at the same time, he's been so injury prone that I don't hate them moving on from him. And when they get something that helps them win now, in potentially Kevin Huerter, and they get a first round pick, which could be valuable for the future, I don't hate this trade. I do think it helps them at the moment, so I'd give them a B minus for this. It does hurt to lose a guy who's been very talented in Jaden Ivey, but it does, like, they're doing what they need to do at the moment to win, which I think when you're the first team in the first seed in the East, I don't hate that. The Warriors, they got Kristaps Porzingis. They got a pick. They lost Kuminga, Hield, and Trayce Jackson-Davis. We talked about the Porzingis trade from the perspective of the Hawks already. Now we're going to talk about it from the perspective of the Warriors. I don't love it, and I feel like I rag on the Warriors on this podcast a lot. That's not what I mean to do. I just don't love the direction that they're going in right now. I don't think that Kristaps Porzingis really moves the needle. Now, if he ends up all of a sudden leading this team, not leading it obviously, but helping this team win a bunch more games, great. But he's injury prone when they already have Jimmy Butler, who's been missing time. He's missing the rest of the season. Steph Curry, whose ankles have been an issue for him, especially recently, and like a old roster outside of them, guys like Al Horford, whose bodies may be starting to kind of degrade. I'm not moved by bringing in another injury-prone guy. Now, do I think that he's better than the starting centers they've been running this year? Yeah, sure, because you'll be able to play. You'll be able to play him. Will you be able to play him? That's a good question. But when he is able to play, like, he'll give you productive value. Kristaps Porzingis is a very talented basketball player. He just is never on the court. I do think they waited too long to trade Jonathan Kuminga. Obviously, he's been in talks for so long, and I heard better trade proposals earlier. Now, do I know if those are true? No, but I do think they waited too long, and now all of a sudden they're in a position where they're like, all right, we got to finally get rid of him, so they give up him and Buddy Hield, who's like Jimmy Butler's best friend, and they get Kristaps Porzingis. So now, worst case scenario for them, right? Porzingis is injury prone. He is injury prone, but he's injured all the time. They can't keep him on the court. Draymond Green doesn't look like the player that they want him to look like. Steph Curry continues to struggle with injury and doesn't have enough to lead them. Jimmy Butler is mad because they traded like his best friend, and when he comes back from injury, doesn't look great. And like, you don't have much young talent, and then this team kind of just fizzles out, and now you're stuck with not a lot of young talent. Best case scenario, Porzingis fits in extremely well, and him and Steph are able to really work together and make some sort of run happen, maybe in the playoffs. I don't know, maybe next year there's something when Jimmy comes back, and they look like a decent basketball team. But I just don't think that there's a whole lot of upside with this deal. Now, I will give them a C+ just because they finally got rid of Kuminga, which they've been trying to do forever, and they bring in a talented player in Kristaps Porzingis, but I can't give them much more than that. I maybe would bump them down to a C even. I don't love this trade for them. The Rockets, they didn't do anything. I give them a C-. Once again, like the Nuggets, they're a talented team already, so they don't need to change a whole lot. I do kind of wish they'd gone and gotten themselves a playmaker. I think that this trade kind of depends on, is Fred VanVleet coming back? Because if he comes back by the playoffs, then I think that you're like, okay, we've got ourselves a playmaker plus the guys around him. But their offensive creation is just so ugly that it's difficult for me to really say, I can get behind them not going out and getting a point guard, but still C- because they still are talented and they didn't need to go make a move. The Pacers did make a big move. They got Ivica Zubac and Kobe Brown for Benedict Mathurin, Ijax, and picks. I'm a big fan of Benedict Mathurin, so losing him, I don't love it for the Pacers, but then again, he's been somewhat disappointing this year. I think that a lot of people, including myself, were expecting a bigger season out of him. So moving him and getting Ivica Zubac in return, I think that's a good move. I think that Zubac will fit incredibly well alongside Halliburton once Hallie's back. Obviously, that's not going to be till next season, so this is kind of an investment for next season, but I do really like it as that investment for next season. I think that this is a good direction for the Pacers to go to, and I think next season they could look like one of the better teams in the East after just going to the finals last year. Then one thing that I do wonder about this, so their pick is really weird. It's like protected 1 through 4 and 8 through 10. So if it's 5 to 7, then the Clippers get it, right? The Clippers get it. If it's 1 through 4 or 8 through 10, the Pacers get it, which is very odd. I mean, I have never seen that before, but I think that giving up that pick could potentially be really scary, but potentially not. We don't know until the lottery. Now, if you miss out on 5 through 7 instead of missing out on 1 through 4, then I guess you're like, oh, okay, fine. Hopefully Zubac just fits in really well. But I do think that if it was 1 through, like, at least they protected it 1 through 4, because I do think that's the most, like, in this draft, which is a very talented draft, you do not want to miss out on getting one of the guys coming into this draft. But I give them a B plus for this. I think this is a good trade. The pick situation and the fact that I'm a fan of Bennedict Mathurin's game is the only reason it wouldn't be in the A range. For the Clippers, actually, so they're right next to each other, they got Darius Garland, Bennedict Mathurin, Ijax, obviously we just talked about them, picks. They lost Zubac, obviously, James Harden, Kobe Brown, and Chris Paul. Chris Paul, they missed. He didn't even get a thank you post that I saw, which pisses me off. But I already talked about that in a different episode. Go check that out if you'd like. Losing Zubac and Harden obviously means that they're going into some sort of rebuild. They're trying to get some young talent. They're saying, okay, we're not good enough this year. It's interesting that they've been playing such great basketball, and then they decide, you know what? Now, I know that Harden did request out, so that does change things a little bit in terms of like, well, we think we're having a really great season, but then Harden comes along and says, I need out of here. They say, oh, great. Best we can get is Darius Garland. Let's move Zubac too and go into an actual rebuild. I don't hate this. Now, they don't have their own pick this year, which does hurt them a little bit. So from their perspective, they should really hope that Pacers pick is in that range where it's not protected. I do think it's interesting that Kawhi Leonard is going to be sticking around on this team because it's a weird timeline that they've got going on. I don't totally know what to think about it. When it was just the Harden Darius Garland trade, I didn't love it because, once again, Darius Garland has been injury prone. And bringing in a guy who's injury prone to play alongside Kawhi Leonard is a little scary because both those guys have shown tendencies to not stay on the court. But I think that bringing in Darius Garland and Mathurin, if they can both stay on the court, that's interesting because those are two younger players who have shown a lot of promise already. And they're going to be worse. So that does hurt. Like, they're going to be worse now. But they did choose the rebuilding path, so I don't hate that. It really does depend on the future. I'd give them like a B- for the moment. I think that, it does hurt to be on such a great run and all of a sudden Harden's like, hey, I want out. But I don't think, in terms of their return, I don't think they did too bad of a job. The Lakers, the other Los Angeles team, they got Luke Kennard. They lost Gabe Vincent in a pick. I give them a B- for this. I think this is a good move to bring in a shooter and a good move to get rid of Gabe Vincent, who I think was about 2 more bad games away from getting killed in the streets of Los Angeles because those fans hated him. But I do think that Luke Kennard will help their shooting a little bit, and he doesn't fit badly. I think that he'll be a decent pickup for them. B- just because it fits their current goals. The Grizzlies, they made a big move that I was not expecting. They got Walter Clayton, Taylor Hendricks, Kyle Anderson, Georges Niang, who I hate, and picks. In return, they gave up Trey J, Triple J, Jaren Jackson Jr., and John Conchar, Vince Williams Jr., and Jock Lando. They did give up a lot, especially considering one of those pieces was Jaren Jackson Jr. I kind of wish from their perspective they'd been able to keep some of those other guys, especially since they're already giving up Jaren. But if they want to go into a full rebuild, then they are doing that. Now, I do kind of wish they traded Ja as well, so I did have to dock a little bit of that. But he might not play much this season anyway, and they'll be into that full rebuild once. I'm assuming they're going to move on from him in the offseason, and they're hoping maybe second half of the year, maybe he gets his value up or something. Like, I'm not exactly sure what the situation with Ja is going to look like. I think that it does hurt to realize that you're not good enough to contend, so you need to rebuild. But I do think that the Grizzlies are in that position, so I do think that it's good that they're finally doing that and saying, okay, this isn't going to work. Let's move Jaren Jackson Jr., right? I don't think that's a bad move. The Heat are the next team. They did nothing. I'm giving the Grizzlies a B- because, once again, they're recognizing what position they need to go towards. It's similar to the Clippers where they're kind of like, now the Clippers I don't think needed to go towards it, but once James Harden asked out, they kind of did. So they say, okay, fine, we'll go in this direction. It's not the most fun direction to go in, but at least they're making a decision, right? The Heat, they did nothing at all. There were all those rumors about Giannis, all the rumors about Ja, all the rumors about every other star ever, because it's the Heat. So, of course, they were saying that. It feels like every trade deadline, it's like the Heat are going to get the 5 best players in the league, and then they do nothing every single time. And this time they did literally nothing. That hurts if you're a Heat fan. I gave them an F. They're the only F I gave out because they're a team that needs to do something more, and they didn't. And I feel like if they had gotten Giannis, that would have been perfect. That's exactly where I wanted him to go. And obviously Giannis didn't end up getting moved, which was a weird, and we're about to talk about him in a little bit. But it was a weird situation going on there, but the Heat clearly were kind of banking on that, and then once they didn't get him, they're like, oh, well, and they didn't do anything for the rest of the trade deadline, which it didn't get any better for a team that we were all expecting to get better. Now, maybe we could give them a D trade grade, but I did feel like sending a statement. Someone needs to get an F, so screw you, Miami. I like the Heat, honestly. I like a lot of what they've got going on, but they needed to make a move, and they didn't. And I feel like that's a trend that is going to make the fans really mad. Now, moving on to the team that Giannis is on still, is the Milwaukee Bucks. Everyone thought he was going to get moved. Shams, thanks a lot. Shams? I feel like I'm pronouncing that wrong. Anyway, they got Ousmane Dieng. They got Nigel Hayes-Davis. They lost Cole Anthony and Amir Coffey. No one cares about that. The fact that they didn't move Giannis is really interesting because everyone expected them to, and I guess they just didn't get a trade package that they thought was worthy of that. But now I feel like, is he going to leave in the offseason? Now you're just opening yourself up to more like, oh, is Giannis going to leave, blah, blah, blah. I'm tired of the narrative. Let's get him out of there. Or let's just not talk about it anymore. I'm tired of talking about it. And I feel like if he's not going to get moved, then I don't know. It just feels like Milwaukee's in a weird spot where they don't want to move him, but they also can't build a contending team around him. So they're just sitting there with one of the best players in the league, gatekeeping him. Great. Puppy guarding him. And it's just, I don't think it's a great situation for them to be in. The trades don't really move me, C-. The Wolves, I really like the Wolves trade deadline. So they got Ayu Dosunmu and Julian Phillips. But then they moved Rob Dillingham, Leonard Miller, and picks. And then they moved Mike Conley, who got traded again, and because of the Andrew Bogut rule, was able to go back to the Timberwolves. So it was a little bit odd. But he is back with the Wolves, I guess. Okay. So they bring in Ayu Dosunmu, who I think could be their starting point guard, maybe not like of the future, but I do think that he helps them a ton this year. And they gave up Rob Dillingham, who like I said earlier, I don't really believe in, and I don't think was going to fit the Timberwolves' long-term plans. And Leonard Miller, who I think they're okay with moving. I think that this is an A-. I really like them bringing in Ayu Dosunmu, and the fact that they didn't actually lose Mike Conley is awesome because he can still continue to be that mentor role, but no longer has to be your starting point guard. So I really like this move for the Wolves. I think that they're going to look even more interesting with Ayu as their guard. We'll see how he fits into this Wolves system, but I think it could be really interesting. The Pelicans got Dalen Terry and picks. They lost Jose Alvarado. I'm not really moved by this trade in either directions. I gave him a C right up the middle. Obviously, Jose Alvarado is a talented basketball player, but the Pelicans said, all right, let's get some picks, whatever. I think it's 2 seconds, something like that. I'm not incredibly moved. I give them a C right up the middle. I don't think this changes a whole lot. The Knicks are the team that got Alvarado, also the team we're talking about next. I do like them getting Jose Alvarado. I think that that's a really good pickup for them. I think he's going to fit the culture. Like, he's another one of the ones who I'm like, I think he fits what they want to do long term. And I think that he'll fit with New York. They gave up Gershon Yabusele and picks. I think this is good for them. I give them a B. I think Jose Alvarado will play good minutes for them. He'll provide them with something that New York Knicks fans will really enjoy, and you didn't give up a terrible amount. Like, it's not like you grossly overpaid. So I do think B for them. Good trade. Good trade deadline for them. The Thunder pissed me off. They got Jared McCain. They lost Ousmane Dieng and some picks. I think this is a good move for them. I think that obviously the Thunder weren't going to do a whole lot because they are still, I think, the best team in the league. They're still incredibly good. I would give them a B plus for this, just because I worry a little bit about what Jared McCain is going to look like in this system, and also the fact that he hasn't been good this year. Now, I know the Sixers said, I think we sold high on him. I don't think that's true. I do think Jared McCain still has a lot left in the tank. He just kind of needs to get back to that. And if he can do that in OKC, then this trade could easily bump up. If this helps him win a championship, obviously this would be looked at as a great trade because they didn't give up a whole lot. I think there is a world where they gave it up kind of for nothing. But once again, like, you don't lose. Like, that team has so many picks that you don't lose much giving up some of them. So I give them a B plus. I think this was a good trade for the Thunder. And we'll talk about the Sixers' perspective on the Jared McCain trade in like a little bit. The Magic, they didn't get anything, and they just lost Tyus Jones and picks, which is kind of funny. They just didn't get anything in return. Now, Tyus Jones, obviously, he hasn't been as impactful for the Magic as I thought he would be. Obviously, he's someone who it's always been like, well, look at his assist-to-turnover ratio. But then it's like, oh, man, what else is he doing? It just hasn't been – these past few years have not been Tyus Jones' best years. Magic, I'm giving him a D. I mean, they could maybe be dropped to an F, but I'll just give him a D. Pause. Then the Sixers are the next team. So let's talk about Jared McCain. They got picks. They lost Jared McCain. They lost Eric Gordon. I'm not moved by them losing Eric Gordon. But Jared McCain, I feel like the thing, like, yeah, he wasn't having a great year, which is why I could see them being like, well, let's move him. You know, we can get picks for him. He hasn't been playing very well. But you have to think about, like, the fan base, right? And Jared McCain was a fan favorite, especially among people on TikTok, right? I'm 2 days into college, and I'm 3 lectures behind. It's a very catchy TikTok. But he's such a fun player that I think it hurts to lose such a positive guy. Now, he'll move on, right? Like, they'll move on. It's not like end-all, be-all. Like, it's not like, oh, my God, I'm not a Sixers fan anymore. And there might be some, but not the majority of your fan base. But it's not, you're getting picks. I think this kind of depends on what Jared McCain looks like. Like, if you go watch him and all of a sudden it's like, oh, man, he looks incredible in OKC, then you're like, wow, we better hope one of these picks pans out. Versus if you watch him and he's awful, then you're like, you know what? Hopefully one of these picks pans out, but we don't feel terrible about giving him up, right? So I gave him a C. I think it could go either way, but I think, like, from a trade perspective, this could be a C+, but just from a fan perspective, it's kind of like they've got to be kind of mad. Like, Daryl Morey is not doing himself any favors by trading away a guy who fans like. And besides, best singer on the team for sure. Next team we've got Phoenix Suns. They got Cole Anthony and Amir Coffey. They lost Nick Richards and Nigel Hayes-Davis. I like this trade. I think Cole Anthony is talented. Amir Coffey can play. Nick Richards, losing him is not the end of the world, and it does free up a little bit of space for Kaman Maliwatch to get some play time in the future. So I would like to see them try him out. But the Suns have been playing really good basketball this year. They make another trade to kind of move the margins maybe a little bit by bringing in a guy who's decent in Cole Anthony. Will he get a ton of play time? Probably not, but it's a decent trade. I'd give him like a B- because they didn't give up much, and I think they got more in return. Blazers, They got Vít Krejci. They lost Duop Reith and picks. I already talked about this trade. C+. I do think that Vít Krejci is talented. I like him as a player. You didn't give up too much for him, so not a bad trade. They could have maybe done more, but C+, you get a decent player. The Kings, they got DeAndre Hunter and lost Dennis Schroeder, Keon Ellis, Darius Arch, and pick. What is the direction of this team? There's just not a lot. So I saw this. I think it was Derek on the Enjoy Basketball group, which they're one of the favorite groups, the Numbers on the Board podcast. I think they're really entertaining. But anyway, he said that the Kings are the one rebuilding team or like the one bad team that there's nothing exciting about. And I thought about that, and I was like, yeah, he's kind of right? Because the Wizards, even before the trades, like even before bringing in the guys that we'll talk about in a bit, they made some big moves. They had some interesting stuff going on, right, in terms of like Alex Sarr, who has interesting talents, and Keyshawn George, who's been playing really good basketball, and Trey Johnson, who I think is really talented. And then you look at like the Nets, who are another not good team, but Yegor Dioman's played good basketball. Nolan Traore's been playing well recently. The guys like, Danny Wolf and Drake Powell, they've shown flashes, right? Like they've got young players who it's like, hey, they're interesting to watch, right? They could blossom into something. The Pelicans, Derek Queen and Jeremiah Fears, now obviously are they going was Derek Queen worth giving up the picks for? I don't know, but he was he's been good. He's played good basketball. The Mavericks, who have been bad this year, they still have Cooper Flagg and Kyrie Irving's on the roster, right? The Kings suck. They don't have a lot going for them at all. And I think that giving up those guys, I do think I'm a big fan of Keon Ellis, so I don't love them giving him up. Now they get back DeAndre Hunter, but then they don't do anything else. Like I was looking for them to move Domantas Sabonis. I was looking for them to move Russ. I don't know how much value you get for Russ, but like DeMar DeRozan, Zach LaVine, these guys that have just kind of been sitting there not helping you win games. And I wanted them to move them and get some young talent, and they didn't do that. So they've still got nothing to really be excited about in terms of their young players, which is unfortunate. I'd give them like a D+. I think that DeAndre Hunter's a good basketball player, which is the only reason it's a D+ and not just a D. But they not bringing in any young talent kind of hurts. The Spurs didn't do anything, but they don't really need to. They're second in the West. I give them a C. They stayed at status quo. Fine. I don't dislike that. The Raptors, they got Trace Jackson Davis and Chris Paul. They lost Ochai Agbaji in picks. I'm not really moved by that. I was hoping maybe they would go get themselves a center. Now, Trace Jackson Davis, I guess technically is a center, but I'm not moved by him as your center, whether starting or not. So I give them a C-. They give up a little bit, and they get, I think, a little bit worse. Hopefully Chris Paul can find some role. I do not want to see Chris Paul go out the ugly way that the Clippers tried to make him go out, but I'm not super moved by by the moves for the Raptors. For the Jazz, they also big swing, right? They brought in Jaren Jackson Jr., John Conchar, Vince Williams Jr., Chris Boucher, picks, and lost Walter Clayton, Taylor Hendricks, Kyle Anderson, Jordan Niang, and picks. So obviously big trades. Now I think I honestly like them sort of making a swing. Now, are they going to contend in this Western Conference? I don't know about that. But when you look at this team and you look at how they're going to look next year, you got Keontae George, who's been playing incredibly this year, Lauri Markkanen, who's been playing incredibly this year, Jaren Jackson Jr., who we know is really talented, and Walker Kessler, who I think actually fits well alongside Jaren because he kind of covers up some of those rebounding issues while still providing another defensive. So like that defense of those two, that's kind of scary. So I think they could actually be really interesting. I don't hate them taking this swing now because I do think they've been more impressive this year in terms of their play than they have been in past years. And if they still get a good pick this offseason, then they can potentially, bring in another great rookie. And if guys like Ace Bailey develop really well, I think this team could be interesting in just a couple of years. They just have to keep this core locked up, and I do think that the Jazz could be an interesting team. So I'd give them a B plus. The upside seems a little bit limited at the moment, just because the West is so difficult to contend in. But I can definitely see the world where this makes them like a much more competent basketball team, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, the Jazz are a playoff team. That wouldn't surprise me. Like in a couple, maybe even next year. Give them a couple of years, but I think that they could be a playoff team in a couple of years. The Wizards want to talk about big swings. This is not what I was expecting them to do. So obviously they got Trae Young earlier. Like I said, we talked about that already. Anthony Davis, D'Angelo Russell, and Jaden Hardy they just got. And they also got Dante Exum, but I think they waived him. All they had to give up was A.J. Johnson, Chris Middleton, Malachi Branham, Marvin Bagley, and picks, which I don't hate giving that up, right? Because Chris Middleton hasn't been good this year, and the rest of those guys you're not particularly moved by. And you bring in Anthony Davis, who if he could fit in, like if I'm assuming that he's just not going to play the rest of the year. Same thing they're doing with Trae Young. They're like, oh, we're being cautious with their health, when really they're just tanking. But then next year, you're looking at Trae Young and Anthony Davis, which is a fun duo because Anthony Davis, solves a lot of, or maybe not doesn't solve, but covers up a lot of the defensive issues of Trae Young. And Trae Young's going to help Anthony Davis feast in the, in the offense. And then you still have Alex Sarr, Keyshawn George, Bilal Coulibaly, Trey Johnson. I kind of like that. I honestly do. I think that that's a really interesting team. I was high on Bilal Coulibaly coming into the year. Keyshawn George, I'm a fan of. Alex Sarr, Alex Sarr and Anthony Davis, like if they can figure out how to play alongside one another, that's terrifying because the shot blocking there is absolutely incredible. And we know Anthony Davis, we know both of them can space the floor a little bit. We know Anthony Davis is a really talented offensive player. So I think that could be a team that obviously they're not going to contend, not yet, but I do think it's a team that could potentially in the future make some big moves. And it's a weird time for them to buy in, but if they're not going to play together till next year, it's not the worst time, especially since the East is weak. So I don't hate it if I'm a Wizards fan. I gave them an A-. I think it's an interesting move. It's at least a move, right? It's at least like, all right, here's the time we take our swing. Sometimes this stuff works, sometimes it doesn't. We'll see what happens for the Wizards. But that is every team. That is their grades. Once again, let me know your favorite team. Let me know how you think they did. This is from me as a basketball fan, not as a fan of each of these teams. So when I talk about Jared McCain seemed like it would suck to lose him if I was a Sixers fan, I'm not a Sixers fan. So if you're like, no, we wanted him out of here, or if you're like, yeah, bring him back, then what do I know, right? But I please do let me know what you guys think. Anyway, we have our games of the week right now. So I'm recording this like right before I'm going to drop it, and the Knicks-Celtics game is already going on, which was my game of the day for today. I'm still just going to say, I haven't been watching it clearly because I've been recording. I'll probably go watch it after this. But, I'm still just going to say that that's my game of the day because it's the only one that I'm really interested in. And it's Knicks at Celtics. I'm going to take the Celtics. They're at home. I don't know if they're up right now or not, but I am taking the Celtics. I'll lock that in right now. Oh, also, I forgot to say last week. Last week we went 3-4. Unfortunate week. The Thunder were injured, which hurt. And, it just, unfortunate week. It's very tough with trade deadline stuff to predict it, but it's okay. We'll get back on track here. Now, obviously, for Sunday, Super Bowl Sunday, the real game of the day is Sunday. Is Sunday. The real game of the day is the Super Bowl. But, whatever. If you're... this next Celtics game is going to be over before the Super Bowl. It's fine. Monday, Cavs coming to Denver to play the Nuggets. I'm going to take the Nuggets here because they have home court advantage, and I do think they are a better Now the Cavs do have James Harden now, and the Nuggets have lost a few games, but they finally got back on track against the Bulls, and hopefully they can keep that momentum kind of going. Tuesday, Spurs going to LA to play the Lakers. I'm taking the Spurs. The Spurs have been playing great basketball recently, and I think that they do have the defense to deal with the Lakers offense, while the Lakers do not have any answer to the Spurs defense or to the Spurs offense. Wednesday, Knicks going to Philadelphia to play the Sixers. I'll take the Knicks in this one. Since I picked against them in the Celtics game. I think that they're better than the Sixers. And now the Sixers could pull this off because the Sixers have played good basketball this season, and they're kind of a team that's like you can never count them out, which is why this is a good game. But I'll take the Knicks by a bit. And then Thursday, Mavs at Lakers. The only reason I'm saying this is because it's Luka versus the Mavs, right? I'm choosing the Lakers in this one. That's kind of a free space. It should be at least, but hey, you never know, right? Maybe A.J. Johnson is the truth, and he's going to come to Dallas, and all of a sudden, A.J. Johnson and Cooper Flagg are the duo of the future. I'd be surprised, but weirder things have happened. But that is all we've got for today. I hope you guys did enjoy. I hope you guys enjoyed the trade deadline. If you're a Heat fan, you probably didn't. But I do think that it was a really interesting trade deadline. Now, Shams needs to stop with the whole, Giannis is getting traded this time, because the gimmick's getting old, Shams. I'm getting tired of it. So I will see you guys next week on Just Talk Hoops. Hopefully you guys have a great week and enjoy the games.